I'm from a family of 16 children. I'm one of 16. I have 10 sisters and 5 other brothers, both from the same parents. My mom and dad, both born in Mexico, and they both grew up on farms. And so I think they thought they were automatically building farm labor, you know, but we didn't grow up on a farm. We grew up in the city. My mom came from a small town, not that small, but a town in Michoacan, Mexico called Morelia. And my grandfather brought her over when she was about 5 years old, and they tried making a go of it in the United States and Texas. And my grandfather apparently got sick and was having a really hard time in the United States and wanted to go back to Michoacan. And he found that the white landowners were really taking advantage of him. He was very young at this time, probably in his early 20s, and he apparently got sick and had like a fever, and heard some people saying that there was a train going to Michoacan. He got on the train with my grandmother and my mother, who was, like I said, just a child, like 5 years old. You know, they didn't have much in terms of possessions. And they were on this train, and all of a sudden they heard people speaking Spanish, and they went to find out what was going on. And my grandfather, in his delirium, it turned out that the train was going to Michigan. Michigan is how they would say Michigan instead of, and he heard Michoacan. So he thought somehow this magical train was taking him back to Mexico, to Michoacan, but it was really going to Michigan. And their faith was very strong, and my grandmother said, it was in God's hands. I had $7 in the dress on my back. So we put it in God's hands, and that's what they did. They came to Michigan, and they worked as migrant workers on the sugar beet fields in Michigan until my grandfather established his own farm, his good name and his work, and he was able to get a farm of his own near Imlay City, and that's where my mother was raised, and she was the eldest of 12 children, and it's kind of a tradition in Mexican families. The eldest will stay with the family and isn't encouraged to move on and start their own family until, I guess until the parents are much older and are taken care of in some way. But my mother fell in love with my father, who was a ranch hand, also from Mexico. He was from a small town called Tanganciquito, and they fell in love on the farm. My mother, the way she would tell the story is that she repeatedly would ask my grandfather, if they could marry, and he would just kind of put them off and say, "Yeah, I'll let you know. I'm thinking about it." And then finally, my father went to him and said, "I really want to marry your daughter. I love her. I'll take good care of her." And he would write letters to my grandfather, basically begging for my mother's hand in marriage. And one day, my mother, she found out that he was just really never going to let them marry, and that he was tearing up these letters and not even reading them and stuff. So she said that's when she realized that they had to elope. This was very scandalous for the time, of course. So one day when it was very cold out, my mother told the story of how she actually came out through a window, lost her shoe in the snow, jumped into a car that was waiting. My father was in the car with some relatives who drove them to Detroit. And they started their life here in Detroit. And my mother said she was just miserable for the first year, just missed her family on the farm, and just felt so bad because my grandparents wouldn't acknowledge their union. And then they had their first child, which was my sister Isabel, the eldest of my 10 sisters. My mother took the baby over to meet my grandparents, and that's when they accepted them as a family, and because they became grandparents. So, the short version of that is that they all ended up loving each other and getting along great. And I have great memories of my grandparents and my parents, and we would go up to their farm every summer when I was a child. So I grew up in the city in Detroit, but I also had fond memories of growing up on the farm. But the food that my mother made was kind of an amalgamation of things that she would pick up through the traditions from where she was from, also from the other cooks, the American cooks, and some Mexican cooks in our little group of families and friends. And the salsa that I brought tonight is garlic and salt, slow roasted jalapenos, tomatoes, and depending on how hot you want it, you leave the seeds in or you don't. And that was it. So it had a very strong garlicky flavor, but it was somehow mixed in with the other simple ingredients, gave it just such a unique flavor. But it was always very thin, and in these jars that they would can, and they would can tomatoes in those days. And after my mother passed away in 2001, I started to remember how she would make the salsa, and I started to become aware of cumin as a seasoning, and I just loved it. And I realized that you could do a lot of versatile things with cumin. And so I added cumin to the recipe and a little bit of sugar because of the tomatoes. And then eventually I started adding cilantro. And there are times when I've even added chopped up like diced avocado, which also gives it a nice body and a nice flavor. The artist in me always wants to experiment and not accept things the way they are, but always find a new way to do things. So that's what you're eating tonight. This is my mother's recipe from Michoacan to Michigan. I hope you enjoy it.
When I was in my 20s, I was in the sculpture program, and I met this guy named Umesh. He was just like kind of a kooky artist that I liked. It's everything we talked about then was really philosophical. We talked a lot about the world, and I'm 21 or something. I was really preoccupied with like injustice and like fairness and suffering. So it was good to meet him at that time in my life. I lived in San Francisco at this time. And I lived in a loft space by myself, and this is .com land, the time of .com in San Francisco. Everyone's getting evicted pretty much because there's all these companies that can pay more money than I could. And so I got a letter once that said that maybe some people in the building was going to get evicted. And I thought, oh shit, I don't have a lease. So I told Umesh about it, my friend, and he says, you should go to Mount Madonna and just kind of like de-stress and hang out. So Mount Madonna in the mountains of Santa Cruz is this kind of yoga center with a bunch of these hippies that started it back in the 70s, and they have a guru from India, and it turns out Umesh was born there. And I had no idea. Here I thought I knew him, and I was like, holy shit, you're like some yogi kid that grew up in this place. And I get there, and the land is beautiful. Like, it's on the top of the mountains. Like, you can see everyone below. There's a pond there. There was trails. I remember I would go on walks in the trails, and you would find like these little like metal deities from India sometimes, and it was such a nice little, relief of the day. And I thought, you know what, these crazy hippies aren't so bad. Then my residency ended, and I went back to San Francisco to get like full-on lawyer letters. I was totally getting evicted at this point. And I thought, I need a bath. Like, I don't know how to process this information. But I'm taking a bath trying to figure out what my next move is, and I look at all my stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to sell all this shit. Like, I'm going to just go to India. So that's what I did. I, like a month later, like Craigslist nonstop, I sold everything. Everyone's got money in San Francisco at this point, so like any dumb thing I put online, people would like offer me tons of money. So anyhow, I raised $6,000, and I thought, great, I'm leaving to India as soon as possible. Mount Madonna has an orphanage in India, and I decided I wanted to go help out. So that was part of the reason I did it. And of course, right away I'm in India, and it's totally different from my reality. I was overwhelmed when I first got there, honestly, and it was hot. I didn't even imagine how hot it was. So I went to my New Delhi space and the hotel I was staying at, And I thought, I can't handle this heat. So right away, I went shopping. I was like, I got to get some cooler clothes because I'm like in my San Francisco sweater, and you know, it's kind of cold in San Francisco. So I buy this skirt. It's this cotton skirt. I remember it was this fuchsia color. And then the women would wear kind of these midriffs inside of their like saris. You can kind of see them peeking out, and I thought, perfect, I'll buy that too. I bought a matching like blue version of it to fit my skirt. And then I saw the arrangement of saris, and I was like, I don't know enough about these saris. This is like overwhelming. This is good enough. And I thought, I think I blend in. And so I was happy. So I put it on, and I'm walking to my hotel, and people are staring at me. And I was like, maybe they're wondering where in India I'm from, you know? Like I'm thinking, I'm doing such a great job blending in, right? Because people thought I was Indian, potentially. You're there, they don't think Latin America. They think like somewhere else in India. I'm on a bus. I'm on my way to Haridwar, where the orphanage is. And again, people are still staring at me at the bus. So I take a rickshaw, and I see everyone waiting for me, all the girls at the orphanage. They have signs, I can tell. I can see the Mount Madonna people who were not Indian, so they stood out. They were like either bright red or super stark white, right? And I thought, okay, this is the right place. And the girls are kind of snickering, and some of them are whispering, and some of them are kind of laughing, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Finally, Rashmi, a woman that was running the orphanage who I knew I had met at Mount Madonna, tells me, the clothes that you're wearing, that skirt and that top, is meant to be worn hidden under your sari. And so I show up literally in like my bra and my panties. Could you imagine that? Yeah, it was horrifying. And the girls, you know, they got over it. Like after a few weeks, we totally bonded. They're super sweet. But one of the things that we would do at night was work in the kitchen. Like everyone had to chop and help with the cooking. So I learned how to make a lot of wonderful like Indian recipes from that one trip. Including this cheese, which is just fresh cheese. And this is part of, which I love about this process. You know, it's super simple. All it is 2 ingredients, milk and lemon. And so you boil the milk, you add the lemon juice, and the ways the solids separate from the liquid, the curds, I guess, the curds from the whey. And then you just have to caress this thing, which is so soothing, until you have cheese. And you just eat it with bread. Super, super simple. I really love making it. But every time I make it, it brings me back to that embarrassing moment. But yet, you know, I have really wonderful memories of that trip. So that's it. Thanks.